David, we've spoken a couple of times at the studio, and I've seen your work on video, working with large crowds and individuals talking about race. You make it look easy, but it's not. And talking about issues of race, especially with folks whose views are diametrically opposed to your own, can be really tough for most of us. Let me begin by asking you, why has it traditionally been so difficult to talk about these issues?
It's so great to be here. I really appreciate being a part of this. I think it's so difficult. One reason is because we all have a sense, no matter where we are in racial groups or on the political spectrum, that a big problem has been committed in our society, that we have this big wound and this big difficult history. And part of the reason why it's difficult is because we all want to be disconnected from that. We all feel uncomfortable that that's been a part of the American story. And so there's very many things to do with that. One thing to do with that is, well, that was a long time ago. One thing to do with it is, well, that wasn't me. That was somebody else. And even if it was a long time ago and it was related to me, there's no moral obligation. That's another place to put that. We all want to be innocent of that. I remember an article by a guy named Shelby Steele, a conservative Black author who I disagree with mostly, but he wrote an article, I think in '88, about the quest for innocence. It's like we all want to be innocent of the problem. And so we have various things we do with that. We deny that racism is real. We deny racism in the past matters. And we deny that there's any connection to us now or any moral obligation. And I think that the struggle around that is part of the reason why it's hard to talk about. And it has always been hard to talk about. So yeah. I'll say a little bit more about that. In preparation for this session, I did a little bit of looking back at public opinion history in the past. And there's public opinions that seem crazy. So, like in the 50s, like 89% of America, or especially white America, was against interracial marriage, right? So we can look at that as bad, but we have other things that are might seem equally strange to us. Like in 1962, 85% of white folks said that Black children have access to equal education as white children in 1962, right? In 1964, 74% of white folks said that the freedom struggle was hurting Black people, right? So there's always been a way in which we want to distance ourselves from the problem. Even by 1969, I think half of white folks were saying that Black people had a better chance at jobs, right? So there's a way in which we all know this racial wound happened, this horrible thing happened for hundreds of years, and we want to say, we're past that, I'm not related to that. And so talking about that and the ugliness of that, and then its a potential effect both on society and on us now is hard. So we don't want to do it, which is why even now, 55% of white folks think that racism against white people is just as significant as racism against people of color. At least that was before George Floyd. So this denial is part of our history and part of what we have to figure out how to talk about.
And what seems to have changed today, this moment, that has led so many new people to joining the conversation about racial equality, many of them, for the first time?
Well, I think that several things have happened. You've had 30, 40 years of racial education about racism, starting perhaps with critical race theory and then ramifying out in the ranks of college and the general culture, where people have begun to examine how has our racial history affected our current situation. You have 30 years of that being in certainly in college texts, if you want to, it's in those college courses if you want to get that, and often in just regular courses. So that has some impact, and that affects the general culture. And then, of course, you had the COVID situation, which puts us all in the house with not enough to do. And then you've had movements over the period of years. You had, Michael Ferguson has spawned Black Lives Matter. And then, so you have the most egregious murder that we've seen of all of these murders. We could go down the list. So, we could look at Eric Garner and Walter Scott and all those. We've never seen a murder like this that seems so brazen, and we're looking in the face of both the victim and the perpetrator. This is Ava DuVernay's point, that what's made this different. So in light of all of that, people said, we've got to do something different. And then also we're getting a daily dose of information about the fact that COVID affects people of color more. So I think all of that came together to say, we have to do something. And of course, and let's be clear, a lot of what's going on out in the street in terms of racial protests, not all of it. There's Republicans out there. A lot of that is anti-Trump. So you also have people wanting an outlet to do something that is against what they think is a problematic administration, racially problematic specifically. So all that combines to say we have to do something different, and that's what you're saying. It's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it creates challenges for the movement.